Today marks the final lesson of Chapter 9, which is Section 3. And it's going to talk about some of the early societies and civilizations of South America. And it's going to start in the Andes mountain range. Now, understanding the Andes Mountains is something that's very important for this section. The Andes Mountains stretch from the country of Colombia in the north all the way down to Chile in the south. The Andes are actually the second highest mountain range in the world, so they're very highly elevated. And most of the settlements that occurred near the Andes are along the coastal plain. For example, in Peru, in the northern regions of the Andes, is where the first civilization occurred in South America. Peru has a very harsh environment for the development of civilization. It's very steep and extremely rocky terrain. It doesn't have very good soil, and then ice and snow cover most of the regions in the higher elevations. The climate is severe. It's hot and dry during the day in some parts and freezing cold at night. So it suggests that the population of this part of the world has to be pretty tough, has to use survival to the fullest. Now, between 3600 and 2500 BC, people began to establish small villages along the Pacific coast. They were generally hunters and gatherers, relying on seafood and small game for sustenance. Around 3000 BC, these people began to farm with the use of agriculture. I'd like to show you a quick map here, which shows you some of the early peoples of South America. We've been learning about Mesoamerica, this region right here in section 2. And then today we're going to take a look at the Andes region of South America. The Chavan were from these purple regions here. That's the first and earliest group. You've got the Moche, which are in the yellow region of the Andes coastal plains. And then you have the Nazca, which we'll take a look here at the end of the section. But this is exactly where these groups sort of originate, near the Andes Mountains, modern-day Peru, parts of Chile. Okay, the first group that we're going to take a look at is the Chavan. The Chavan is a culture of the Andes Mountains that flourished from about 900 to 200 BC. The Chavan culture spread across much of northern and central Peru. Archaeologists have not found evidence of political or much economic organization. So that tells us that the Chavan were primarily a religious organization. Chavan art in the form of stone carving, pottery, and textiles was spread to many other cultures. Chavan is known as the mother culture of South America. The other mother culture that we've learned about in this chapter was the Olmec. They were the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Roman numeral 2, we'll talk about some of the other Andean civilizations that flourished during this time period. We'll take a look first at the Nazca. The Nazca was a culture that flourished along the coast of southern Peru from around 200 BC all the way up to 600 AD. Now, the area that the Nazca come from is actually very dry. Therefore, the Nazca developed extensive irrigation systems. They utilized underground water canals quite often to channel water to their fields for farming. Now, the Nazca are famous for several things. The first one and the most prominent one being the Nazca Lines, which are highlighted in your textbook here on page 248. The Nazca Lines are basically drawings with geometry being used that are very large over the landscape. There's spiders, there's hummingbirds, there are large billed birds and ducks and things of that nature. We've just recently, in the last week or so, discovered a brand new Nazca line, which was of a cat. You can probably find it in some of the news stories that have been covered recently. But most often in the studies of the Nazca lines, we believe that they actually marked water aquifers below the surface. That's what we believe they were marking. But some people think that the Nazca would make these drawings to please the sky or mountain gods, which would be the only way you could see these would be from the sky or the mountains. Some folks believe, like I just mentioned, that the lines indicate where surface water would enter the plains, and so you could find those water aquifers underground as water sources. The final civilization that we'll take a look at are the Moche. Now, the Moche were a civilization of the northern coast of Peru. They lasted from 100 to 700 AD. They created extensive irrigation systems with the rivers that flow from the Andes. They grew a wide variety of crops such as corn, beans, potatoes, squash, and peanuts. Jewelry in the form of gold, silver, and semi-precious stones were also found in archaeological studies. This suggests that the civilization had a great deal of wealth. Moche pottery is something that is really important. Their pottery gave us a significant look at everyday life. Some of the practices that they completed, some of the things that they did were significantly drawn in Moche pottery. And archaeologists have learned a great deal about the Moche people from their pottery because it depicts scenes from everyday life. Those are the basic cultures of the Andes Mountains there in a nutshell: the Chavan, the Nazca, and the Moche.